Hello guys, in this video we will be discussing more examples for motion in 2D or 3 dimensions. Okay, so for the first example, a squirrel has x and y coordinates 1.1 meter, 3.4 meter at time t1 equals to 0 and coordinates 5.3 meter, negative 0.5 meter at time 3.0 seconds. For this time interval, find the components of the average velocity A and B, the magnitude and direction of the average velocity. Okay, so let's remember first what is the formula of the average velocity. Okay, diba that is in terms of x and y. Okay, in terms of x and y, that is x and y or 2D dimension, that is the delta of the r or the position vector divided by the delta of time, diba? So we have here the first uh, position vector r1 as 1.1 meter I plus 3.4 meter j, and we have r2 as 5.3 meter I vector plus um, minus 0.5 meter j. Okay, so if the average is delta r, that is r2 minus r1 over delta t. Okay, so we just have to um, subtract r2, which is 5.3 meter minus 1.1 meter I plus negative 0.5 meter minus 3.4 meter j divided by the time interval, which is 3.0 seconds minus 0.0 seconds. So we have the average velocity. Okay, the average velocity. Okay, we have the average velocity as, let's subtract 5.3 minus 1.1. Okay, then divide it by 3, so that is 1.4 meter per second I. Okay, and then let's proceed to the y component. 0.5 minus 3.4 divided by 3, so that is negative 1.3 meters per second j. Okay, so that is the components of the average velocity, or we can answer it like this: 1.4 meter per second, and the y component of the velocity is negative 1.3 meter per second. So sa letter B naman, okay, the magnitude and direction of the velocity. So how do we get the magnitude? Of course, that is the square root of vx squared plus vy squared. Ayan. So v is equivalent to 1.4 meter per second squared plus negative 1.3 meter per second squared. So the velocity is 1.4 squared plus negative 1.3 squared, which is equivalent to 1.9. Okay, so if we will check, okay, if we will check, dapat is 1 decimal. Okay, 1.9 meter per meter per second. Okay, and the direction would be uh, the theta would be the inverse tangent of the y component, which is negative 1.3 over 1.4. So let us solve for the direction. Negative 1.3 over 1.4. Negative, the theta is negative 42.9 degrees. So if we are going to plot that, ayan, ang y component is negative pero positive x. So nandito siya banda. Ayan si velocity. Ayan. 42.9. Okay. So, kung manggagaling tayo sa positive x-axis, counterclockwise, ayan. So, 360 minus 42.9. So, the direction would be 317.1. Okay. Pwedeng ganito, 317.1 degrees or negative, we can write it as 42.9 degrees below horizontal. So that is the horizontal line. So that is the direction of the velocity, which is 1.9 meters per second. Okay? So let's proceed to example number 2. A rhinoceros is at the origin of coordinates at time 0 to t2 12 seconds. Okay? The rhino's average velocity has x component. Okay? So, ang average velocity daw ni rhino during that interval is negative 3.8 meters per second, and the y component is 4.9 meters per second. This is average velocity, okay, during this interval. So, at time t2, 12.0 seconds, what are the x and y coordinates? Hinahanap si x and y coordinates. Okay, so the position. How far is the rhino from the origin and the distance? Okay. So, punta muna tayo sa A. So, meron tayong components ng Vx and Vy, okay? And we know that the average velocity, okay, is a result from the um, uh, change in the r position or the position vector over delta time, okay? So, alam natin na ang delta time natin is between 0 to 12 and the delta r is, sabi niya, at the origin of coordinates. A rhinoceros at the origin of coordinates at time t1 to t2, the rhinoceros average velocity has x and y components. So, technically, ang r1 natin is nasa 0, 0. Okay? Or, nasa 0i plus 0j. Okay? Ito yung nasa time 0 siya. At t2, ano na ngayon yung x and y coordinate niya. Okay? So, ang gagawin natin is, dahil ito yung result, so malamang ang sagot dito is negative 3.8 I plus 4.9. Lagyan natin ng unit para hindi magkalituhan. 3.8 meter per second I plus 4.9 meter per second J is the result of x2, which is x2 minus x1, which is 0, okay, I plus y2 minus 0 j, okay, divided by x2, y2. divided by 12.0 seconds minus 0.0 seconds. So, ito, i-multiply lang natin doon. So, negative 3.8 times 12, that is equivalent to negative 45.6. Negative 45.6 meters I plus, okay, minultiply lang natin to doon ha. Okay, 4.9 times 12, that is equivalent to 58.8 meters J, ay equivalent siya sa x2 minus 0 or x2 I plus y2 minus 0 or y2 J. Okay, so technically x2 is equivalent to negative 45.6 meters and y2 is equivalent to 58.8 meters. So, eto na yung x and y coordinate. Okay? Now, hanap niya is the distance from the origin. So, malamang the distance formula is x2 minus x1, okay, plus y2 minus y1, which is the initials are 0, initial condition. So, anong mangyayari lang dyan is squared, okay. So, mangyayari dyan is negative 45.6 meters squared plus 58.8 meter squared. So, the distance from the origin would be equal to negative 45.6 squared plus 58.8 squared. So that is equivalent to 74.4. Okay? 74.4 meters. So this is the final answer and this one. Okay. So now let's proceed to number 3. Okay, a jet plane is flying at a constant altitude. Okay, at time t1 it has components of velocity. So meron na naman tayong velocity at time 1, which is 0. May velocity x tayo na 90 meters per second and may vy tayo na 110 meters per second. Okay, at time t2 30.0 seconds, the components are, okay, meron tayong Vx na negative 170 meters per second at meron tayong Vy na 40 meters per second. For this time interval, okay, ang time interval ay 0 to 30, calculate the components of the average acceleration. So we know that the average acceleration is equivalent to delta V over delta T. Okay? So, ang V2 minus V1 over delta T. So, ang V2 natin, we can write V2 as negative 170 meter per second I plus 40 meters per second J. Okay? And we have V1 as 90 meters per second I plus 100 meters per second J. So, dito, pwede natin siyang isulat as negative 170 minus 90 meters per second I plus 40 minus 110 meters per second J. Ayan. Divided by 30.0 minus 0.0 seconds. Okay? So, the acceleration or the average acceleration would be, let us calculate negative 170 minus 90 divided by 30. Okay? That is negative 8.0 let's say if you are going to um, two significant figure. Ayan. So here, negative 9, okay, meter per second squared. Okay. Now let's that is I only, and plus I sorry. I think this is minus. Okay. 40 minus 110 divided by 30. Oops. Divided by 30, that is equivalent to negative 2. Okay. Negative I negative 2 meter per second squared J. So we have here the AX as negative 9 meter per second squared and the AY as negative 2 meter per second squared. And if you will compute for the magnitude and the direction, so syempre magkakaroon tayo ng AX squared plus AY squared. Okay, so A is equals to negative 9 squared plus negative 2 squared. Okay, then the average acceleration would be 9 squared plus 2 squared. Okay, we have 9.2 or 9 meters per second squared. Okay, and the theta or the direction would be inverse of negative 2 over negative 9, which is equivalent to negative 2 over negative 9, 12.5, 12.5 degrees. Or if we are going to plot that, negative negative nandito siya, so 12.5, so plus 180, so we have 192. Okay, or uh, 192.5 degrees. Yan. So, yan. Um, let's proceed. Okay na. So, let's proceed to the next example. A dog running. A dog running in an open field has components of velocity Vx. Okay, so meron na naman tayong given na Vx. 2.6 meters per second and Vy negative 1.8 meters per second at t1 10 seconds. Okay, for the time interval t1 to t2 20 seconds. Okay, the average acceleration of the dog, so meron tayong average acceleration na 0.45 meters per second squared at the direction of 31 degrees measured from the positive x-axis towards the y-axis. So, paganyan siya. Okay. Now, meron tayong average acceleration. Ang hinahanap ngayon is at t2, 20 seconds, what are the x and y component? So, we all know that the average acceleration is a result of the delta v over delta t, di ba? So, meron tayong delta t na 20 minus 10, so walang problema. And then, delta v, meron tayong v1, 2.6 meters seconds. Ang v1 natin is 2.6 meters per second I minus 1.8 meters per second J. Ayan, yan yung V1. Now, the problem is, ano yung V2 or V at 20 seconds? So, meron tayo nito Okay, and the theta. So, kunin muna natin, di ba, ang A can be written as AXI plus AYJ. Okay, so let's get first the X and Y component. How do we get it? Di ba? AX is equivalent to A cosine theta and AY is equivalent to A sine theta, di ba? So, A is equivalent to 0.45 meters per second squared cosine 31.0 degrees. So, ito naman is sine 31.0 degrees. Ayan. So, meron na tayong X and Y. So, let's compute 0.45 cosine 31. That is 39, okay, meters per second squared. And kapag sine naman, sine, oops, sine, that is 0.23, okay, meters per second squared. And dito na lang tayo sa gilid, okay. And AXI plus AYJ is a result of V2X minus V1X, diba? I plus V2Y minus V1YJ over 20.0 seconds minus 10.0 seconds, diba? So, let's just 0.39 meter per second squared I plus 0.23 meter per second squared J equals V2X minus ang V1 natin nandito na 2.6 okay, meter per second I plus V2Y minus negative 1.8 minus minus, so that is 1.8 meter per second J divided by 20 minus 10, that is 10.0 second. So, multiply lang natin tong time doon, okay? So, 0.39 times 10, okay? 3.9 meter per second squared I plus 0, sorry, plus 2.3 meter per second squared J equals V2X minus 2.6 meter per second I plus V2Y plus 1.8 meter per second J. And we can now equate, ayan, V2X minus 2.6 is equivalent to 3.9. So, V2X is 3.9 plus 2.6. 3.9 plus 2.6. Okay? So, that is equivalent to 6.5. So, V2X is 6.5 meters per second. Meters per second na lang pala ito, not squared. Okay, kasi second, so magka-cancel yung isa, sorry. Ayan, 6.5 and then V2Y minus plus 1.8 is equivalent to 2.3. So, 2.3 minus 1.8. That is equivalent to 0.5. Tama ba? Okay, that is equivalent to 0.5. So V2y is equivalent to 0.50 meters per second. Yan. So meron na tayong answer for uh, letter A. Okay, eto na yan. Okay, and then letter B is what are the magnitude and direction of the dog's velocity. Okay, the magnitude, of course, can be solved as V x squared plus vy squared, diba? So v is equals to 6.5 meters per second squared plus 0.50 meters per second squared. Ayan. So v is 6.5 squared plus 0.5 squared equivalent to 6.5. Okay? Equivalent to 6.5 meters per second. So the angle, okay, so the angle would be zero point 0.5 over 6.5 equivalent to 4 point equivalent sa 4.5 degrees. Okay? So 6.5 meters per second and 4.5 degrees uh, from above the positive x-axis. So this is the magnitude and direction for the velocity. Okay? So next, let's proceed to example number 5. A physics book slides off a horizontal tabletop with a speed of 1.10 meters per second. It strikes the floor in 0.480 seconds. Ignore air resistance. Find the height of the tabletop. So, parang meron tayong lamesa. Ayan. For example, meron tayong table. Ayan. Okay, kalahati lang. Tapos, meron tayong libro. Sabi niya, slides off horizontal table with the speed. Slides off, ayan. Meron na nag-slide daw yung book at 1.10 meters per second at bumaba siya after yan, bumaba siya after time na 0.480 seconds. Okay? Ang hinahanap is the height. So, let's set this at the top as the datum, which is 0. Ayan. So, dahil parang combination to ng projectile and free fall, ang acceleration natin ay equivalent sa 9.8 meters per second squared. Constant yan, okay? So, kung ang height ang hinahanap, meron tayong formula na diba, y is equals to y0 plus voyt minus 1 half gt squared, diba? Okay? And, ano pa ba? Wala naman tayong vertical velocity, initial velocity. So, this will be 0. Pero, ayan, meron tayong time given, diba? So, pwede natin siyang isolve. Okay. Negative 1 half 9.8 meters per second squared and the time is 0.480 seconds squared. Okay? So if you're going to solve that, that would be negative 1 half 9.8 0.48 squared. Ayan. So, the height would be negative 1 point. Kung susundan natin, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, okay. So, negative 1.1, okay, meters. Ayan. Negative kasi below the datum siya. So, ito na yung height ng table. So, ang height ng table ay 1.1 meters. Okay. And B, the horizontal distance from the edge. So, horizontal naman, di ba may formula tayong x. x0 plus VOT. Wala tayong acceleration na horizontal. So, x is equals to 0 plus VOT is 1.10. Okay. VOX yan. Horizontal distance times 0.48 seconds. So, 1.10 times 0.48. So, ang horizontal distance is equivalent to 0. 0.53 meters. Okay? So, next, the horizontal and vertical components of the book's velocity, magnitude and direction of its velocity just before the book reaches the floor. So, ano daw po yung VF? Okay? VF. So, dito na lang tayo sa gilid mag-solve. Ayan. So, may formula tayo na VF is equals to VO, VFX, VOX. Wala tayong acceleration. So, 0. So, ang VOX natin ay 1. Tama ba? 1.10 meters per second. Okay. Now, ang VFY natin, ito yung magbabago. Diba? VOY minus GT. Wala tayong initial velocity na vertical, pero meron tayong acceleration na negative 9.8 meter per second squared at 0.480 seconds. Okay? So, negative 9.8 times 0.48. Ayan. So, ang VFY natin is negative 4.7 meters per second. Now, ang V natin, VF has the component 1.10 meter per second ay minus 4.7 meter per second J. So, kung kukunin natin ang magnitude, so Vx squared plus Vy squared, that is 1.10 meter per second squared plus negative 4.7 meter per second squared. Okay. That would be equivalent to 0.1 squared plus negative 4.7 squared. Oops. 0.7 squared. That would be equivalent to 4.8. Okay. Velocity is 4.8 meters per second. Now let's get the direction. The direction would be negative 4.7 over 1.10. Ayan. So, the direction would be negative 4.7 over 1.10 Ayan. So, theta is negative 76.8 degrees. So, kung ipa-plot natin siya, okay, positive ang x, negative ang y, so ganyan. So, ang sagot natin would be 4.8 meters per second, 76.8 degrees below the horizontal line. Okay. So, next, let's proceed. Um, Positive. Below the positive horizontal line. Ayan. Okay. Now, let's proceed to the next example, which is example number 6. A daring 510 Newton, okay, swimmer dives off a cliff with a running horizontal leap as shown in the figure. So, horizontal lang yung velocity niya. Wala siyang VOY. What must her minimum speed be just as she leaves the top of the cliff so that she will miss the ledge at the bottom? So, dapat hindi siya tatama dito, which is 1.75 meter wide and 9 meter below the top of the cliff. So, dapat pagtalon niya, sakto dito siya. Okay? Sa tubig. Now, meron tayong, syempre, x na 1.75. Yan ang goal natin. And a y na 9.0 meters. Okay, so kung dito ang datum natin, so ang y natin is negative 9. So may formula tayo dyan, di ba? Ang x is x0 um, plus voxt. Ayan. And ang y natin is y0 plus VOYT minus 1 half GT squared. Okay? So, ano daw yung velocity niya dapat para hindi siya tatama doon? Kung x dapat niya ay 1.75, okay, so let's say yung ito ay 0, yan, equals 0 plus VOX T. Okay, wala tayong VOX, wala rin tayong time. Tignan natin dito. Dapat daw ang 9 meters siya, 9.00, okay, meters. Negative kasi pababa siya ng datum, equals 0. Wala siyang VOYT kasi sabi niya lang horizontal leap, okay. So, minus 1 half 9.8 meter per second squared t squared. So, makukuha natin yung time dito. Ayan. Kunin natin siya by mode 5, 3. Negative 1 half 9.8. Ayan. And then, sa letter C is positive 9. So, ang time na mabibigay is 1.36 seconds at saka negative. So, yung time na isa na negative 1.36 ay hindi i-consider dahil ang time cannot be negative. So, ito yung answer for the time. So, 1.75 equals VOX times 1.36 seconds. Ayan. So, ang VOX natin would be 1.75 divided by 1.36, which is equivalent to 1.75 over 1.36. Equivalent siya ng 1.29. Okay. 1.29 meters per second. So, ito dapat yung horizontal speed or minimum speed niya para hindi siya tumama dun sa kanto. Okay? So, next, let's proceed to example number 7. Ayan. The Earth has a radius of 6,380 kilometer and turns around once on its axis in 24 hours. Okay. Okay. So, what is the radial acceleration of an object at Earth's equator? Give your answers in meter per second squared and as a fraction of g. Yan. So, ito ay pasok dun sa topic natin na uniform circular motion. Yan. Okay. So, meron tayong given na radius na 6,380 kilometer. Sabi niya, what is the radial acceleration of an object? So, kung ito yung Earth at ito yung radius mo, ano daw yung acceleration ng object? Okay. Pwede ring pa ganyan, ano yung acceleration ng object? Dahil ang uh, dahil ang acceleration is constant, okay? Ang gagamitin natin dito ay yung arad, okay? At meron tayong given na sa 24 hours daw meron tayong 1 revolution. So meron tayong given na period 24 hours per 1 revolution. Ay hindi, baliktad. Ang T natin is 1 revolution ay 24 hours per 1 revolution. Tama pala, yan. So, may given tayo na T at meron tayong given na radius. So, pwede natin gamitin is yung 4 pi 4 pi squared r t squared. Ayan. So, ang arad natin is answer daw sa meter per second squared and as a fraction of g. Okay? 4 pi squared 6,380 times 10 to the 3 meters. Okay? And 24 hours, convert natin sa second, 1 hour ay 3,600 seconds squared. Ayan, so what is the answer? 4 pi squared 6,380 over 24 times 36 squared. So we have a acceleration of 0.034 meter per second squared, or kung as a fraction of g, kasi diba pag fraction of g, let's say for example ito yung fraction, this is the g, and it should be equivalent to 0.034 meter per second squared. So ang x natin would be 0.034 divided by 9.8 meter per second squared. So, divide na lang natin to 0.034 divided by 9.8. So, that is equivalent to 3.4 or 3 ilan ba? Okay. 2 decimal places. Ay, 3.5, okay, times 10 to the negative 3 g. So, this could be acceleration in terms of g, ha? And this is in terms of meter per second squared, okay? So, let's go. Letter B pa. If A rad at equator is greater than g, objects will fly off the Earth's surface and into space. What would be the period of the Earth's rotation have to be for this to occur? So, sabi niya, kapag g daw or greater than g yung acceleration, lilipad na lahat ng bagay, okay? So, ano daw yung period dapat para mangyari yon? So, 9.8 meter per second squared, equate lang natin siya sa 4 pi squared r t squared. Okay. So, t is equivalent to 4 pi squared r over 9.8. Ayan. 4 pi squared, 6380 times 10 to the 3 meters over um, 9.8 meters per second. Ayan. So, makukuha natin is second. 4, 4 pi squared times 6380 over meter per second squared over 9.8. Ito ay taas ay raised to 3. Yan. So, 5,609.64 hours. Okay. Or we can have, ay, seconds pala. Sorry. So, or we can convert that in hours. So, pag kinonvert natin siya sa hours, that is 5,069.64 seconds times 1 hour over 3,600 seconds. Divide lang natin siya ng 36. Okay, that is 1 hour. 1 hour minus 1. Then, let's convert this to uh, minutes times 60. Ayan. 1 hour and 24 minutes. Yan. Okay? So, that is the period. Okay, 1 hour 24 minutes to complete one revolution. Okay, now, let's proceed to example number 8. Our balance is maintained, at least in part, by the endolymph fluid in the inner ear. Spinning displaces this fluid, causing dizziness. Suppose that a skater is spinning very fast at 3 revolutions per second. Okay? So, meron tayong period na 1 second is 3 rev. Okay. Okay. Suppose that the skater is spinning very fast at 3 revolutions per second, about vertical axis through the center of his head. Take the inner ear to be approximately 7 centimeter from the axis of the spin. 7 centimeter rather from the axis of the spin. The distance varies from person to person. Ayan. What is the radial acceleration of the endolymph fluid? So, di ba may A rad? Ayan. Equals to 4 pi r squared over t. Ano daw yung radial acceleration in meter per second squared and in G's? Okay. So, dating gawi, 4 pi 7 centimeter 100 centimeter times 1 meter. Ayan. Convert lang natin. So, malito. Oops. 4 pi squared r. Ayan. Over t squared. Ang t squared natin is 1/3 squared. 1/3 squared. Ayan. So, ang A rad natin is 4 pi squared 7 over 100 over 1/3 squared. So, the answer is 24.8 k meters, or 24.9 rather 24.9 meter per second squared. Kung in second squared ngayon, in fraction of g, di ba, xg is equals to 24.9 meter per second squared. So x is 24.9 over 9.8. So 24 divided by 9.8. This is 2.5. Okay. 2.5. Ah, 2.5. So, in terms of G, ang A-rad natin ay 2.5 G. Yan. So, this is the final answer. Now, let's proceed to the next. Okay. Next example, a railroad flat car is traveling to the right at a speed of 13 meters per second relative to an observer standing on the ground. Someone is riding a motor scooter on the flat car. What is the velocity, magnitude, and direction of the scooter relative to the flat car if the scooter's velocity relative to the observer on the ground is A, 18 meters per second to the right, B, sige, unahin natin yung A. Yan, meters per second to the right. Now, if you remember relative velocity, ang formula niya, 'di ba? So, for example, 'di ba, need dyan is two particles na magkasama and then a stationary observer. Ayan. Ayan. Two particles na magkasama. So, halimbawa, yung unang particle na nasa loob is A and yung nasa labas is B. So, kung ang inoobserbahan mo is yung velocity ng A, is mangyari dyan is velocity of A with relative to the stationary observer is equivalent to velocity of A relative to the uh, second particle plus velocity of B relative to the stationary observer. Ganyan lagi yung formula. So, kung halimbawa ito, ang hinahanap is what is the velocity, magnitude, and direction of the scooter relative to the flat car. Okay? Ang hinahanap mo is, let's say for example, ito yung observer, ito yung scooter, tapos F. Okay? So, ang hinahanap natin is velocity of the scooter. Ang hinahanap, 'di ba? What is the velocity of the scooter? Okay, yan na. Velocity of the scooter dapat with relative to the observer first equals velocity of the scooter with relative to the moving object, which is the flat car, plus velocity of the flat car with regards to or relative to the observer. So, sabi niya dito, if the scooter's velocity relative to the observer on the ground is 18 meters per second to the ground, meters to the right, so ito yon, ito daw, yung 18 meters per second ay yung velocity ng scooter relative to observer. Okay, ang hinahanap is the velocity of the scooter relative to the flat car. At ang flat car natin, relative to an observer is 13.0 meters per second. So, kapag hinanap natin to, that is equivalent to 18.0 meter per second minus 13.0 meter per second, or the velocity of the scooter with relative to the flat car is 5.0 meter per second. Okay? That is letter A. Now, let's proceed to letter B. Dito na lang. Hinahanap ulit is ganon ulit. VSO equals VSF plus VFO. However, the scooter's velocity relative to the ground is 3 meters per second to the left. Okay. Scooter relative to the ground, so negative 3.0 meters per second VSF plus flat car na 13.0 meter per second. Okay, so the velocity of the flat car relative to the velocity of the scooter relative to the flat car is equivalent to negative negative 16. Okay? 0.0 meters per second kasi transfer lang natin. Now, sa letter C naman, which is 0, okay, VSO is equals to VSF plus VFO, okay, negatives ay 0 daw to, so VSF plus 13.0 meters per second. So, ibig sabihin, ang velocity of the scooter with relative to the flat car is equivalent to negative 13.0 meters per second. Okay? Yan. So, that is the final answers. Okay. So, let's proceed to the last example. A moving sidewalk in an airport terminal moves at 1.0 meters per second and 35 meters long. If a woman steps on at one end and walks at 1.5 meters per second relative to the moving sidewalk, how much time does it take her to reach the opposite end if she walks in the same direction the sidewalk is moving? So, meron daw moving sidewalk. Oh. So, for example, ito si moving sidewalk ng airport. Ayan. So, may observer dito. Andito si ate girl or si woman, which is W. Moving sidewalk, gawin nating S. Okay. And then, the observer dito is E. Ayan. So, di ba ang formula lagi? Ang hinahanap natin is how much time, si yung babae. Okay. So, V, W, with regards to ground, okay, equals VW with regards to the moving particle plus V particle na moving with regards to the ground. Okay? So, sabi dito, the moving sidewalk, okay, the moving sidewalk ay 1 meters per second. Yan, ito yon in terms of the ground. And then, si woman is 1.5 meters per second. Sa letter A, in the same direction, so positive, positive. Ayan. And then, ang hinahanap is the uh, velocity of the woman in terms of the ground. Okay? Kasi ang hinahanap dito is the time. How much does it take her to reach the opposite end? So, 1.5 plus 1, okay, that is 2.5 of course, okay. Meron na tayong velocity. And that is equivalent sa distance over time. Ang distance natin is 35 meters long na walk over time. So, ang time natin would be 35 divided by 2.5. So, 14 seconds siyang maglalakad papunta sa same direction nung moving sidewalk. After 14 seconds, nandun na siya sa kabilang dulo. Paano naman daw kapag opposite direction? So, ang gagawin lang natin is VWE equals to negative 1.5 plus 1.0 meters per second. To the right, ito to the left. Okay? So, ang mangyayari dyan, ang magiging sagot is magiging negative 0.5 meters per second. That is equate natin sa never mind the sign. Ang ibig niyan sabihin lang sa sign is from the opposite direction siya or going to the left. So, distance is 35.0 meters and the time, so the time is 35 divided by 0.5. 70 seconds siyang maglalakad bago siya makarating sa kabilang dulo. So, this is letter B and then this is letter A. So, that's the end of it. Okay? So, tapos na po. Thank you for watching.